faithfully conveying value and interpreting great books from around the world. Hello, this is Sally's Book Talk. Today, I'm introducing a book titled The Beiyang Treaty Revision History, Obscured by the Abolition of Unequal Treaties, or simply Beiyang Treaty Revision History. The author Teng Qihua holds a PhD in International Relations History from the London School of Economics and has long been dedicated to researching modern Chinese diplomatic history. So before we dive into the book, let's first understand two key terms. When discussing the abolition of unequal treaties and Beiyang Treaty revisions, people immediately think of the Treaty of Nanjing, Treaty of Shimonoseki, and Boxer Protocol. Truly, modern Chinese history is stitched together by these unequal treaties. Through these treaties, foreign powers gain privileges like extraterritoriality, tariff control, and concessions, severely infringing upon China's national sovereignty. Statistics show that from 1842 to 1949, successive Chinese governments signed 745 unequal treaties with Western powers, astonishing in both number and scope. This is arguably unparalleled in colonial history. These unequal treaties carry too much bitter memory. Therefore, from their signing, they faced continuous Chinese resistance. Abolishing them became modern China's most urgent anti-colonial demand and stirring rallying cry. Compared to this, Beiyang Treaty Revision history appears much less turbulent. It refers mainly to the Beiyang Government's diplomatic efforts from 1912 to 1928 to revise unequal treaties through peaceful negotiations based on international law. Yet, this history remained overlooked for so long. This relates to the radical political discourse of that era. After entering the 20th century, Chinese nationalism surged, especially post-May 4th and May 30th movements. Abolishing unequal treaties became the most galvanizing political slogan. There was hope that large-scale mass movements could resolve all accumulated modern problems at once. This all-or-nothing vision aligned with radical social currents and public sentiment. This book reveals the previously neglected diplomatic history of the Beiyang government. Through arduous negotiations, the Beiyang government sought diplomatic autonomy, achieving significant breakthroughs and progress. In modern diplomatic history, it plays a transitional role bridging the past and the future. So, next, I'll outline the background and developments of the Beiyang government's treaty revision diplomacy in three chronological stages. The first stage, from 1912 to 1918, was a pivotal turning point in modern China. The end of imperial rule, the founding of the republic, and the emergence of ideas for equal and reciprocal treaty revisions in diplomacy. After the Republic of China was established, the Nanjing Provisional Government, led by Sun Yat-sen, and later the Beiyang government declared they would inherit the unequal treaties signed by the Qing government to gain recognition from foreign powers, keeping them in effect. However, while accepting the old treaties, the Beiyang government set up a treaty research committee in the foreign ministry, starting to foster concepts of equal and reciprocal treaty making. No, the government cabinet then resolved to stop signing treaties like those under the Qing, ensuring no more unequal terms such as tariff control, extraterritoriality, or most favored nation treatment would appear, meaning no more unequal treaties going forward. During this time, the Beijing government's biggest diplomatic success was joining World War I and, under international law, revoking the privileges of Germany and Austria-Hungary in China, reclaiming the German concessions in Tianjin and Hankou. This marked China's first proactive diplomatic move based on global shifts in modern times, a groundbreaking achievement in Chinese diplomatic history. The second stage, from 1919 to 1925, involved the Beiyang government actively proposing revisions to unequal treaties at two key international conferences, and seeking legal foundations in international law for treaty amendments. The first conference was the Paris Peace Conference after World War I. As a victor, the Beiyang government sent a 52-member delegation, making it China's first time participating in a major international conference as a winner. The Chinese delegation included 5 plenipotentiary representatives, with the key figure being the youngest delegate. Wellington Koo, born in 1888 in Jiading, Shanghai, to an official family, entered St. John's College in Shanghai at 13 for modern education. At 17, he enrolled at Columbia University in the U.S., majoring in political science and international diplomacy. During his university years, Wellington Koo already showed exceptional diplomatic talent. He was fluent in English, French, and German, knowledgeable about various countries' diplomatic histories, and had eloquent speaking skills. After the Xinhai Revolution, Wellington Koo became the English secretary to President Yuan Shikai. At that time, he hadn't even graduated with his doctorate yet, and Columbia University made a special exception to hold his graduation defense early. In 1915, at just 27 years old, Wellington Koo became the minister to the United States, making him the youngest minister in modern China. What truly brought him fame on the international diplomatic stage was this Paris Peace Conference. Although China participated as a victor nation, it still faced discrimination. First, this was evident in how delegate seats were arranged. The conference divided participating countries into 3 tiers. The first tier had 5 great powers: Britain, France, America, Japan, and Italy, each with 5 delegate seats. Second-tier countries each had 3 seats. The third tier included newly established or independent nations, each with only 2 delegate seats. At the time, China was seen as a weak nation, classified as third tier, so its 5 delegates couldn't all attend at once. They had to take turns. This blatant discrimination deeply hurt Wellington Koo, and he resolved to do everything possible to fight for China's legitimate rights and showcase a new diplomatic image. So at this conference, China's main focus was reclaiming all German privileges in Shandong. Since China and Germany were enemies in WW1, why couldn't they reclaim Shandong immediately upon declaring war, like they did with the Tianjin concessions? Well, after declaring war on Germany, Japan, also an allied power, seized the chance to send troops to Shandong, fought Germany, and took over German interests there. Due to the rush, the Beiyang government hadn't given clear instructions on Shandong, but Wellington Koo used his sharp diplomatic insight to draft a proposal beforehand, prioritizing Shandong to fully prepare China's stance. Therefore, the highlight of China's role at the Paris Peace Conference was Wellington Koo defending China's position on the Shandong issue. He spoke eloquently and argued forcefully on the merits. From cultural, historical, and geographical angles, he explained that Shandong is an inseparable part of China. Finally, Wellington Koo concluded, as everyone knows, the West produced a sage named Jesus, who was martyred in Jerusalem, making it a holy land for the West. Similarly, in the East, China's Shandong produced a sage named Confucius, whom even the Japanese revere as the sage of the East. Saying this, he turned with a smile to the Japanese delegate Makino. Mr. Makino, wouldn't you agree? Caught off guard, Makino was very passive, extremely embarrassed, and repeatedly nodded in agreement. At this point, Wellington Koo suddenly raised his voice and declared, "Since Mr. Makino acknowledges Confucius as the Eastern sage, then Shandong is the sacred land of the East. China cannot abandon Shandong, just as the West cannot lose Jerusalem." During the half-hour defense, Wellington Koo completely captivated the delegates with his fluent English, elegant demeanor, and elegant debating skills. However, Western powers ultimately transferred Shandong's rights to Japan to balance their interests. When the news reached China, nationwide outrage erupted. The May 4th movement broke out domestically. Unable to endure this, Wellington Koo and the delegation unanimously decided to refuse signing the Treaty of Versailles with Germany. On June 28, 1919, when the Versailles Treaty signing ceremony was held at the Palace of Versailles, a peculiar scene unfolded in diplomatic history. And delegates were astonished to find both seats reserved for China's plenipotentiary representatives completely empty. Chinese representatives used empty chairs to protest the conference's injustice, making China the only nation among 27 participants to refuse signing. Although China failed to reclaim Shandong at the Paris Peace Conference, this marked a crucial turning point where modern Chinese diplomacy shifted from passive to active. The second conference was the Washington Conference in late 1921, where powers reconvened to adjust the Far East Pacific order. For Chinese diplomacy, this presented an opportunity to resolve the unresolved Shandong issue left from the Paris Peace Conference. Thus, the Beiyang government appointed Minister to the U.S. Cao K. Alfred Say as chief delegate, Minister to Britain Wellington Koo, and Supreme Court President Long Chong-hui as plenipotentiaries, forming a strong 130-member delegation. Whether China could demonstrate a new diplomatic image and achieve breakthroughs at Washington depended on these three delegates' diplomatic skills. We've already introduced Wellington Koo. Now let's discuss the other two. Cao K. Alfred Say held a Master of Arts from Cornell University. At 16, he was selected as an interpreter for the Chinese minister to the U.S. He had traveled abroad to study political systems and legal institutions in Japan, Western Europe, and the United States. After the Republic's founding, he successively served as minister to Britain and the U.S. Wang Chonghui was a Yale law doctor. Following the Xinhai Revolution, he served as foreign minister of the Nanjing Provisional Government. All three delegates studied in America and mastered international law and diplomacy. After thorough discussions, they learned from the Paris Peace Conference lessons, because at that conference, Chinese delegates immediately presented all specific issues up front, but failed to pass them, leaving no room for maneuver and resulting in extreme passivity later. To seize initiative, this time the delegation didn't dive straight into specifics. Instead, they first proposed 10 principles to establish a legal foundation. This left the powers no excuse to oppose during later agenda items. The three delegates divided responsibilities based on expertise. Long Chong-hu, versed in legal theory, handled reclaiming foreign concessions and abolishing extraterritorial rights. Wellington Koo, skilled in debate, took the thorniest issue, Shandong. As chief delegate, Cao K. Alfred Say oversaw comprehensive negotiations in Japan's withdrawal from Qingdao. Each defended their assigned topics. After stating their positions, the other two could supplement and expand during actual debates. They also agreed each would draft memorandums, submitting them only after unanimous approval. Thus unified and coordinated, the delegation targeted objectives, concentrating firepower for a splendid diplomatic campaign. Most crucial among the 10 principles was the first. Nations must respect China's territorial integrity and administrative independence. This formed China's fundamental diplomatic principle at the conference. When Say presented this, a French delegate arrogantly questioned, "With warlord conflicts and North-South division, can your delegation represent China?" Say sternly retorted, "China has one delegation and one government, fully representing the internationally recognized legitimate authority." Thanks to thorough preparation, China's delegation shone brilliantly at the Washington Conference, achieving major diplomatic breakthroughs. That first, the legal foundation for abolishing unequal treaties was established. Proposals ending foreign privileges in China became formal documents through signed treaties, except leasehold territories. On February 6, 1922, 8 nations, including the US, UK, Japan, and France, signed the Treaty on Principles and Policies Concerning China, known as the Nine-Power Treaty. Respect for China's sovereignty, independence, and territorial and administrative integrity was incorporated into the treaty text, establishing the legal foundation for further abolition of unequal treaties. Secondly, the unresolved Shandong issue from the Paris Peace Conference was finally resolved. On February 4th, 1922, China and Japan signed the Treaty for the Settlement of Outstanding Issues Relating to Shandong, forcing Japan to return the former German-leased territory of Jiangsu to China and withdraw troops from Qingdao and along the Jiaoji Railway. Thus, Shandong's sovereignty was finally reclaimed. Overall, at both the Paris Peace Conference and Washington Conference, the Beiyang government declared for the first time to the powers its intent to comprehensively revise unequal treaties and abolish foreign privileges in China. Oh, in some ways, it's really that a weak country has to rely on diplomacy. This is how China, through diplomatic negotiations without military backing, painstakingly reclaimed its sovereignty bit by bit. And beyond these confrontations with great powers, the Beiyang government also leveraged international shifts to sign 2 equal treaties during this period. One was the Sino-German Agreement, signed with Germany in May 1921. This was modern China's first equal new treaty. It marked the first and only time China obtained war reparations as a victor nation, receiving over 84 million yuan in compensation. While the other was a treaty signed with Soviet Russia. After the October Revolution, the Soviet government proactively expressed willingness to abolish all unequal treaties signed between Russia and China. The 1924 Sino-Soviet Agreement made Soviet Russia the first nation in modern times to voluntarily renounce its privileges in China. All right, with the groundwork laid in the second stage, the Beiyang government began taking concrete actions regarding treaty abolition. This marks the third stage of Beiyang diplomacy and the centerpiece of its foreign policy. This period started in 1925 and lasted until 1928, when replaced by the nationalist government. In 1925, on May 30th, crowds from all sectors of Shanghai gathered in the concession to protest Japanese cotton mills suppressing Chinese labor movements. British police actually opened fire on the crowd, causing the May 30th massacre that shocked China and the world. The Chinese nationalism surged, with all sectors demanding abolition of unequal treaties, voices rising everywhere. The Beiyang government seized this opportunity, backed by public opinion, to demand collective treaty revisions from the powers, but faced obstruction and delays. And the Beiyang government decided to change diplomatic tactics, adopting an expiration-based treaty revision approach per international law principles, first negotiating with countries whose treaties were about to expire, targeting key points individually. By 1926, 3 treaties were nearing expiration involving France, Japan, and Belgium. Drawing from past experience with great powers, the Beiyang government chose to bypass tricky France and Japan initially, starting with Belgium to create an opening for treaty revisions. The Sino-Belgian Treaty was signed by the Qing government in Belgium on November 2, 1865 in Beijing, taking effect on October 2, 1866 after both governments ratified it. Through this treaty, Belgium gained consular jurisdiction agreements, tariff control rights, leasehold establishment rights, most favored nation treatment exemptions, and other colonial privileges. The treaty stipulated revisions every 10 years, but only Belgium had the right to propose amendments each decade. In 1926, the Sino-Belgian Treaty reached its 6th 10-year expiration point. 6 months before expiration, China's foreign ministry summoned the Belgian minister to declare termination of the old treaty and willingness to negotiate a new equal reciprocal treaty. They proposed using the remaining 6 months for new treaty negotiations. Belgium quickly responded, agreeing to sign a new treaty. But they insisted China guarantee the old treaty would remain effective during negotiations. China suspected Belgium might use delaying tactics to perpetuate the old treaty's validity. China refused, with both sides deadlocked and Belgium lacking military power to intimidate China. Brussels sought Anglo-American intervention. With British backing, Belgium threatened to appeal to the Hague International Court if China terminated the treaty, even warning it might. As a signatory of the Boxer Protocol and Washington Treaty, Belgium could reactivate the old treaty, including stationing troops in China and demanding indemnity payments. When the deadline arrived, Belgium still refused to sign the new treaty. Facing this crisis, China's path forward wasn't just about the treaty, it concerned the nation's diplomatic standing. The whole world watched how China would handle the Sino-Belgian Treaty. At this critical moment, the Beiyang cabinet reshuffled, appointing Wellington Koo as premier and foreign minister. He adopted flexible and pragmatic foreign policies, resisting Western powers' pressure for final negotiations with Belgium. The day after the treaty expired, Wellington Koo had a final showdown with Belgian minister Henri Wafos. This became a famous diplomatic negotiation in modern Chinese diplomatic history. For 4 long hours, both sides engaged in a fierce war of words. Wafos, being a lawyer by training, was skilled in debate. He brought numerous diplomatic documents, citing authorities and speaking eloquently in an attempt to force Koo into submission. But he clearly underestimated his negotiating opponent. Wellington Koo had meticulously prepared beforehand. He refuted each colonial privilege in the old treaty point by point, without even glancing at notes. All international laws and diplomatic terms were at his fingertips. After this round, Wafos suffered a crushing defeat, but still arrogantly refused to revise the treaty within the deadline. Facing Belgium's unreasonable stalling, Wellington Koo made a swift decision to shift diplomatic tactics from expiration-based revision to expiration-based termination. On November 6, 1926, the Beiyang government finally played its major card, issuing a declaration drafted by Wellington Koo announcing the termination of the Sino-Belgian Treaty. This marked modern China's first unilateral termination of an unequal treaty officially abolished by government decree. The Sino-Belgian Treaty termination caused a strong shock in international diplomatic circles and set a positive precedent for diplomatic economy. In 1927, the Sino-Spanish Treaty of Tianjin was about to expire. The Chinese government recalled the Spanish minister to China, hoping to renegotiate a new treaty based on equal and reciprocal principles. But Spain insisted revisions should only cover commercial tariff clauses, leaving all other terms unchanged. The Beijing government advocated complete abolition and a new treaty. With both sides irreconcilable, negotiations failed. So finally, following the precedent set by the Sino-Belgian Treaty abolition, the Beijing government unilaterally declared termination of the Sino-Spanish Treaty on November 10, 1927. The Sino-Belgian and Sino-Spanish Treaty terminations were masterpieces in Chinese diplomatic history, pioneering the path for China's diplomatic autonomy. They significantly influenced later treaty revisions and abolitions. As seen across the Beiyang Treaty Revision's 3 stages, under new global conditions, the Beiyang government completed a series of negotiations based on international law, reasoned, forceful, and measured, reversing the abysmal diplomatic situation of the late Qing era. Of course, many factors contributed to these diplomatic achievements. Next, I'll discuss the favorable timing, geographic conditions, and human harmony in Beiyang diplomacy through 3 aspects: the international landscape, diplomatic strategies, and the professional diplomatic team. Soon after the Republic's founding, World War I broke out, completely reshuffling the global political landscape. Post-war, Military threats against weak nations were no longer mainstream in diplomacy. In resolving international conflicts, international law and justice gained respect. The world changed. Justice overcame power politics, establishing foundations for diplomatic negotiations. Diplomacy began favoring weaker nations. So why could the Beiyang government propose treaty revisions under these conditions? Here, I must introduce a famous diplomatic term, the principle of rebus sextantibus. The rebus sextantibus principle is ancient customary international law. Simply put, it's the changed circumstances doctrine. This principle holds that treaties are signed based on certain fundamental conditions continuing to exist. Once those fundamental conditions change, signatory states can invoke this clause to terminate the treaty. Rebus sextantibus has strong traditional roots in the West, where nations generally adhere to it. After WWN, China's government wasn't the Qing dynasty anymore. It had established a republic. Formerly a civilized nation now, it had also joined the victorious Allied powers. This massive circumstantial change allowed China to consciously apply rebus sextantibus, proactively arguing at Paris and Washington conferences that unequal treaties were historical issues needing resolution. With this foundation, implementation required flexible diplomatic strategies. Initially, the Beiyang government demanded collective negotiations with all powers for comprehensive revisions, but this rushed approach proved ineffective and faced united resistance. The Beiyang government then made major adjustments, establishing the policy of revising treaties upon expiration and declaring them void when lapsed, shifting from broad assault to targeted action. Then, establishing new equal treaties. Indeed, this achieved major breakthroughs and significant diplomatic results. The Sino-Belgian and Sino-Spanish treaty abolitions I mentioned earlier were flexible applications of this strategy. So, of course, the most crucial factor was the human element. Beiyang diplomacy's breakthroughs stemmed from its world-class team of professional diplomats. China's professional diplomats emerged around the Xinhai Revolution, primarily composed of Western-educated returnees. Most came from scholarly families or missionary backgrounds, received excellent early education, and gained rich diplomatic experience. Beyond Wellington Koo, Say, and Wang, outstanding figures included Liu Tong Sing and W. Yen. Born in Shanghai in 1872, his father was a missionary with progressive views who sent Liu Tingchang to Shanghai early on. He studied at the Guanfanyan Guan to learn Western affairs knowledge. The Guanfanyan Guan was established by the Qing's Zhongli Yamen, specifically to train foreign language talents. Liu specialized in French there. Later, he entered Beijing's Tongwen Guan for advanced studies. After graduation, he was selected to work at China's legation in Russia. W. Yen was born in 1877 in Shanghai's Hongkou district to a missionary family. His father co-founded St. John's University. Yen studied in America, earning a Bachelor of Arts from the University of Virginia. Yen mastered English and edited the Standard English Chinese Dictionary, the first major Chinese compiled bilingual dictionary. He later formed cabinets 3 times as premier and served 7 times as foreign minister, becoming a leading figure in Beiyang diplomacy. On March 30, 1912, Liu Sang-Tiang became foreign minister in the first cabinet. While abroad, Liu presented 3 conditions to President Yuan Shikai before accepting the position. First, appoint an English proficient vice minister. Second, ensure diplomatic professionalism by banning external recommendations to the ministry. Third, maintain foreign ministry independence without presidential interference. Only after Yuan agreed to these did Liu return to assume office. These principles profoundly influenced Republican diplomacy's first half. Upon taking office, Liu resolved to reorganize the foreign ministry based on Western models, drafting new organizational laws, and making overseas missions professional institutions staffed by career diplomats. He also required all diplomatic officers to master a foreign language, with selection through nationwide competitive exams. Due to Lu's frail health and frequent absences, actual ministry leadership fell to the vice minister. These career diplomats maintained relative independence, rising above party and factional struggles. Despite chaotic politics and frequent government paralysis during the Beiyang era, diplomacy advanced steadily. Such contrast that warlords generally respected the diplomatic corps. President Cao Kun once said, "I don't understand diplomacy. We'll follow Xiaochuan's lead." Xiaochuan was Wellington coup. Even Zhang Zuolin, the last Beiyang leader with bandit origins, deeply respected diplomatic talent and refrained from interfering. Thus, the foreign minister gained more autonomy and initiative in formulating foreign policies. During the Washington Conference, an American diplomat remarked, "If other ministries demonstrated the diplomatic corps' competence, China would become a world power." This might be exaggerated, yet such a highly skilled, deeply patriotic diplomatic team emerging in chaotic China was truly fortunate for Chinese diplomacy. Their achievements deserve greater recognition by posterity. This is precisely why author Tang Qihua aims to re-examine and reinterpret this historical period. All right, this concludes our exploration of the Beiyang Treaty Revision history, obscured by the abolition of unequal treaties. Reading notes are below the audio. We'll meet again tomorrow.